Evil doesn't always roar like a lion. Sometimes it smiles like an old friend. We often imagine evil as something grand and unmistakable, but in truth, it's the opposite. Some people enter our lives quietly, charming, witty, magnetic. They don't scream to do harm. They manipulate with silence, distort with a tender gaze, and make us question the truth of our own perception. This video isn't meant to frighten or judge. It is an invitation to stand firm within ourselves, to see clearly what is harmful, and to guard our peace in the spirit of Stoicism. If you've ever felt drained or hollow after being with someone, it might not be your imagination. Your instinct may be sounding the alarm, and perhaps now is the time to heed it. 1. They charm you, but you always feel at fault. The allure of the mask, the nature of manipulation. Some people enter our lives like a gentle breeze, pleasant, captivating, and magnetic. They make us feel special, seen, and validated. In early conversations, they know exactly when to listen, when to joke, and they present a version of themselves so flawless, we forget to question it. But if we are perceptive or seasoned, we'll recognize one thing: charm that comes too fast, too perfect, often conceals something unreal. What's frightening is not the deceit itself. What's frightening is how they make us believe every problem originates with us. When someone constantly shows they know better, do better, are more grounded, and even our smallest mistakes become reasons for mockery or critique, then no matter how sweet they seem, it's no longer a healthy bond. We begin to doubt ourselves. Am I just being too sensitive? Maybe I really am awkward. Why do I always seem to say the wrong thing around them? These questions loop in our minds, slowly corroding our self-worth. Manipulators rarely attack head-on. They're just joking. They only say it because they care, or they're offering feedback for your own good. But the truth is, beneath that concern lies a need to control, to elevate themselves by diminishing others. And the most dangerous part, they make us feel grateful for being treated this way. Manipulation isn't always driven by conscious malice. Sometimes it's unhealed wounds passed from one person to another. But whatever the reason, if someone consistently makes us feel smaller, lesser, this is not something to ignore. Picture this: you're sharing a light-hearted story about yourself, and they interrupt with a smile saying, "That's kind of dumb. If I were you, I'd never have done that." It may sound casual, even playful, but if you listen closely, it's a dismissal wrapped in charm. At first, you let it go. The second time, you laugh it off. But by the third or fourth, you start speaking less, sharing less, shrinking, just to avoid being judged. That's the moment you begin losing yourself to preserve a toxic connection. Stoics do not teach us to resist with anger. They teach that truth needs time to reveal itself, and that early emotions, whether admiration or discomfort, are to be observed, not obeyed. In a world that prizes appearance over depth, encountering those who seem too perfect is not why. But remember, a person's true nature only surfaces when they stop trying to appear good. So don't rush to trust just because someone makes you feel special in the beginning. Let time do its work. Watch how they act when things don't go their way. Notice how they respond when you disagree. A truly kind person never makes you question your own worth. We must bravely face the truth. Some relationships make us feel lonelier than being alone, and sometimes letting go of someone so magnetic who constantly makes us feel not enough is the highest form of self-respect. In a healthy relationship, the initial charm gives way to lasting respect. But in a toxic one, that charm is merely the opening act in a long play of control, manipulation, and erosion. If you find yourself having to guard your own thoughts and feelings around someone, it's likely not yourself you need to adjust, but your distance from them. Remember, We have the right to doubt when something feels off, even if the other person seems perfect. And peace of mind should never be the price we pay to keep someone close. The Stoics teach that inner freedom is sacred, never to be violated, not through force, but through jokes masked as honesty, not through shouting, but through feedback that belittles, not through threats, but by making you believe you are the problem. We don't need to clash, but we must be clear-eyed. And sometimes clarity begins with asking ourselves, why do I always feel guilty when I've done nothing wrong? That question may be the first light leading us out of the sweet fog of manipulation and back to true freedom, dignity, and self-command. 2. They feel nothing when you're in pain. A cold heart behind a kind face. There exists a kind of person who confounds us deeply. Even as they inflict pain on others, their gaze remains cold, their voice composed, as if nothing has happened. They do not shout, insult outright, or rage aloud. Yet it is precisely their silence or their way of dismissing our pain with a few casual words that leaves wounds deeper than any insult. What disorients us is that they appear kind, well-mannered, even admired by many. But beneath that polished exterior lies a heart uncued by the suffering it has caused. We begin to doubt our own feelings when we speak of what hurts us instead of being heard. We are met with vacant eyes or hollow replies like, "You're overthinking it," or "I don't see why that's such a big deal." Gradually, we're no longer sure we have the right to feel hurt. Each time we express emotion, we are made to feel guilty for having felt too much. And so, we retreat inward, grow quieter, and tell ourselves to toughen up, to be less complicated, all in an effort to keep the relationship from unraveling. But this isn't strength. It is the self-veering of one's connection to their own soul. The emotionally indifferent often wear clever disguises. They do not act like brutes. On the contrary, they may seem thoughtful and reasonable. They may always be punctual, behave courteously in public, or even offer help when it's needed. Yet what they all share is this: when confronted with someone else's pain, they show no true empathy. They feel nothing. No remorse, no unease, and certainly no sincere apology. If they do apologize, it is merely a tool to smooth the moment, not the fruit of understanding. This is why such people are dangerous. They don't wound you loudly. They make you bleed in silence. And when you turn to them in your pain, you find no anger, no affection, only a cold void. They make you feel as if you're the one who is too sensitive, too fragile, too needy. But the truth is this: you are only asking for one simple thing: to have your pain acknowledged. We don't need someone to save us, but we do need someone willing to remain with us in our sorrow. Not to solve it, but to be present, to say, "So, I see that you're hurting," or simply to hold a hand in silence. That is the one thing the emotionally indifferent cannot give. For to them, your pain is not worth even a moment's pause. In truth, you may have lived through such a relationship. Perhaps you once loved someone, did everything to bring them joy, always ready to share and saw sacrifice. Yet every time you were in pain, they became distant, like a stranger. Each time you cried, they grew confused, then turned the blame on you. Or worse, they fell silent and left you alone to wrestle with your feelings. Over time, you stopped crying, not because the pain had vanished, but because you realized your emotions had no place in that relationship. Stoic philosophy does not teach us to flee from emotion. On the contrary, it guides us to recognize and govern our emotions through reason. But to do that, we must first have our emotions acknowledged as real. A person who lives by the Stoic spirit will not dismiss the emotions of others. They will not tease nor push you away. for being vulnerable. They will stay calm and composed, neither ruled by emotion nor indifferent to your suffering. The emotionally indifferent, by contrast, only pay attention when there is something to gain. When you are strong, successful, joyful, they are near. But when you are weary, broken, in need, they vanish. And if you speak up, they make you feel guilty for asking too much. This is the moment you must see clearly. A relationship without empathy cannot offer emotional safety. Empathy is not the ability to fully understand another, but the willingness to stay when they need you most. It's being able to say, "I don't fully understand, but I'm here." If the one beside you cannot or will not do this, then you are not wrong to feel hurt. You have the right to feel. You have the right to wake, and you have the right to walk away. The emotionally indifferent, who wear kindness as a mask, don't need to shout to cause harm. They only need to be absent when you need them most. And that is the kind of wound that lingers in silence, slowly making you forget that you are worthy of love and understanding. And so, the lesson is not merely to recognize them, but to return to yourself, to no longer confuse politeness with the empathy species, or a nice person with one who truly cares. We must learn to set healthy emotional standards, where silence is not the default answer, where an apology is not a luxury, and where presence is not something you have to beg for. 3. They manipulate through emotion, not reason, turning feeling into chains. There are people who don't need to raise their voice or issue commands, yet still get us to follow their will, almost unconditionally. They don't control through power or choice, but through something far subtler, emotion. And most disturbingly, they don't even need to use their own emotions. What they manipulate are ours. You can recognize it in situations that seem ordinary. When we disagree with them, they suddenly fall into prolonged silence, filling the air with tension. When we decline a request, they act deeply wounded, making us feel guilty. When we start to voice our own needs, they interrupt with something like, "You know, I'm really exhausted right now. I didn't think you'd be this selfish." Suddenly, we go from being the hurt one to being the one at fault. And once again, we step back, give in, then silently blame ourselves for being insensitive. What's frightening here isn't their anger. It's that they know precisely what weakens us. They don't need to shout. They only have to tug the right emotional strings: guilt, shame, fear of abandonment, and pull until we surrender. This is how they turn our emotions into shackles. At first we think, "I'm just being too sensitive," or "they're going through something difficult. I should be more understanding." But over time, a pattern emerges. Whenever we try to set boundaries, they use emotion to tear them down. And if we're not careful, we stop living for ourselves and start living to please them, to avoid conflict, to keep the peace. But that so-called peace comes at a steep cost: our emotional freedom. Stoic philosophy teaches us that we cannot control the actions of others, but we can control our own responses. Yet when we've been emotionally manipulated for long enough, even our reactions no longer feel like our own. We lose the ability to distinguish between a free choice and one driven by fear or guilt. A classic example is the victim tactic. They do wrong, then immediately cast themselves as the one who's been hurt. "I only wanted what's best for you. I've done so much for you. How could you say that?" It sounds like pain, but in truth, it's a trap. When we see ourselves as heartless, we excuse their behavior again and again. That is not forgiveness. That is being ruled by misplaced compassion. There is another form of manipulation: controlled anger. There is no need for shouting. A shift in facial expression, a few wild words, or a sudden withdrawal from conversation, and we are instantly thrown into unease. We want to make peace. We want to heal. We want to set things right, even when we've done nothing wrong. And over time, whenever we try to speak our truth, a vague fear arises. Will they turn cold again? Am I starting a conflict? This is no longer communication. This is emotion used as a weapon, and we become its puppet. A Stoic does not let emotion override reason, nor do they use emotion to control others. They believe self-mastery is a virtue, and that no one should coerce another, whether by words or tears. Communication between two healthy individuals cannot be built on fear, guilt, or emotional debt. It must begin with willingness, clarity, and equality in feeling. So how can we tell when we're being emotionally manipulated? A clear sign is when you frequently feel guilty, even when you were simply protecting your own boundaries, or you feel the need to soothe the other person every time they're upset, even if it has nothing to do with you. You feel like you're walking a tightrope, afraid of upsetting someone, afraid of saying the wrong thing, and most telling of all, you feel further and further away from yourself. A healthy relationship doesn't make us fear honesty. It doesn't keep us obsessed with the question, are they happy or angry today? It doesn't make us feel like every emotion we have must be edited to fit someone else's expectations. If you're in a space where your genuine feelings are constantly turned into faults, you're not being loved. You're being controlled. And perhaps the most painful truth is this: we are often the understanding one, the generous one, the compassionate one, and that very trait makes us the easiest to manipulate. But this is when we must remember, being empathetic does not mean allowing ourselves to be controlled. We can love deeply and still hold our boundaries. We can listen and still say no when something harms us. And above all, we can forgive, but not be led by distorted emotions. Emotional self-control is not the silencing of feeling. It is the awareness of what we feel and the choice to respond in a way that protects our dignity. When facing emotional manipulation, the strongest move is not yelling, not arguing, but remaining grounded, refusing to be drawn into their psychological game. Pause and ask yourself, when was the last time I felt truly myself in this relationship? If you can't answer that, then it's time to step out of the cycle of emotional manipulation and return to your own sovereignty. 4. They despise boundaries and will test them. Control is their weapon of choice. There is a truth we must confront. Toxic people do not fear conflict. They fear boundaries, are the natural limits of control. They are invisible yet firm fences that protect the parts of life we are meant to govern: our time, our space, our emotions, and our values. But for those who crave control, boundaries are intolerable. They see boundaries as rejection, as a threat to the power they seek within the relationship. And so they will try, subtly or brazenly, to cross, bend, or erode the limits we try to set. We may have experienced this in personal relationships, at work, or even within our own families. You say you want personal space. They call you selfish. You say you won't answer messages at midnight. They say you are cold. You decline a meeting because you're unwell. They go silent for a day to make you feel guilty. At first, those reactions confuse us. Then comes the guilt. Maybe I was too rigid. Maybe they are hurt because I was careless. Should I be more flexible? And so, little by little, we pull back our boundaries just to keep the peace. But that peace is bought at the cost of our autonomy. The troubling part is that manipulators aren't always aware they are controlling. Sometimes it's habit, sometimes instinct, or a pattern shaped by wounds yet to heal. But whatever the cause, the result is the same. We begin to lose our voice. Those who hate boundaries often act under the guise of love. They want to know where you are, who you're with, what you're doing. They want you to share everything all the time. They act concerned if you go somewhere without informing them. And if you choose not to share, they make you feel guilty. This is control dressed as care. Dangerous, because it's easy to justify. You set a passcode on your phone. They think you're hiding something. You need a quiet evening alone. They say you're being distant. Every independent act is scrutinized, reinterpreted as betrayal or emotional neglect. And then you begin to self-censor, just to avoid being misunderstood. That's the clearest sign. When you must shrink yourself to maintain peace, you are no longer yourself. Stoic philosophy constantly returns to the idea of self-governance. Autarkia. This is not just financial or behavioral independence, but sovereignty over one's inner life and personal choice. When someone repeatedly violates your boundaries, they are not just influencing your actions. They are gradually eroding the very foundation of your self-rule. The deeper issue is that many of us were taught that love means sacrifice. That's true only when the sacrifice is voluntary, not when it's a surrender to pressure. Because if love demands the removal of all boundaries, then it does not build, it depletes. Someone who truly respects you will respect your boundaries. They may not understand them right away. They may feel hurt, but they won't try to break them just to satisfy their own emotions. On the contrary, someone who hates boundaries will see each one as a challenge, a battle to win. In order to maintain control, we must learn to say no without guilt, to keep a day for ourselves without asking for permission, to decline a meeting simply because we need rest and feel no need to explain further. Because every time we uphold a boundary, we are defending a part of our identity from being dissolved. It won't always be easy. Sometimes setting a boundary will provoke a strong reaction. They may get angry, accuse, or make you feel like you're destroying the relationship. But if a relationship can only exist in the absence of your boundaries, then it is not love. It is prolonged emotional control. We cannot teach others to respect our boundaries if we are not firm ourselves. A boundary is not a wall. It is a declaration of dignity. It is a reminder to ourselves and the world. I know what harms me, and I do not allow it to continue. Think back to the last time you said no to someone. How did they respond? Did they go silent to unsettle you? Did they return with unusual sweetness to make you feel guilty? Did they shift the blame to you as if you were the problem? If so, you are facing someone who cannot accept boundaries because they cannot accept losing control. The Stoic understands that control is not strength. Control is fear in disguise. One who needs to control others is someone who cannot govern themselves. And so, setting boundaries is not about pushing people out of our lives. It is about keeping our minds free from intrusion. In a world that constantly asks us to be softer, to endure more, let us be brave enough to say, I need my own space. No need to shout, just clarity, consistency, and the calm resolve to stand firm when our boundaries are tested. 5. They exhaust you, yet you feel guilty for wanting to leave. When fatigue is disguised as duty, one of the clearest signs that we are entangled in a toxic relationship is the feeling of exhaustion without knowing why. There may be no constant arguing, no obvious harm to body or finance. Yet after every interaction, we feel mentally drained, emotionally hollow, and worst of all, guilty for wanting to let go. This is the kind of relationship that doesn't destroy by intensity, but by persistence. It is not a storm, violent then gone. It is a fog, clinging, lingering, slowly disorienting us without our awareness. And in that state, the exhaustion doesn't erupt. It seeps into every detail of life. We lose focus, lose interest in what once brought us joy, and often find ourselves questioning and doubting who we are. What all exhausting people have in common is that they demand far more than they give. They expect us to listen to every story, where every failure is someone else's fault. They expect us to be available, whether it is 2 a.m. or during work hours. And when we express fatigue, they deflect. I thought you were the one who understood me best. Or worse, if you leave too, who will I have left? That statement carries not just blame, but implants a message in our mind. If we walk away, we are cruel. Gradually, that relationship is no longer held together by mutual agreement, but by something far more dangerous. A guilt-laced sense of duty. We no longer stay out of love, but out of a sense of debt. No longer attached through joy, but bound by the fear of hurting them. And from that point on, we are held not by commitment, but by guilt carefully planted by another. A telltale sign of this kind of relationship is asymmetry. One side constantly creates tension, while the other constantly tries to resolve it. One side repeatedly demands attention, while the other must always stretch themselves to keep things stable. To outsiders, the one carrying the weight may appear strong, selfless, devoted, but in truth, they are draining themselves to sustain an unhealthy dependence. Manipulation here doesn't always come from malice. Often, it's the unconscious repetition of wounded attachment patterns from the past. But that doesn't lessen the damage, because in the process, the other person, us, is forced to carry the emotional weight of both people, while our own legitimate needs are framed as selfish or irrelevant. A common example is when we ask for personal space. The other responds with extreme despair. So I don't matter to you anymore. Is that it? Or, I knew it. Everyone leaves me. Their reaction isn't grounded in reality. It's the projection of negative emotions onto us, making withdrawal feel like betrayal. And so we stay, not because we believe this relationship makes us better, but because we can't bear their wounded eyes, their sorrowful voice, or their punishing silence. Some even stay out of fear the other might do something reckless. But what no one says is this: staying not out of love, but out of fear, is one of the most insidious forms of captivity. When someone makes us feel guilty for needing rest, for needing space, for protecting our inner life, they are not a companion. They are someone who places their feelings above our right to be free. A key symptom is the blurring of responsibility. When something goes wrong in the relationship, they always shift the blame. When conflict arises, it becomes about our past faults, our sensitivity, our lack of understanding. And once apology is completely replaced by accusation, the relationship ceases to be fair. Someone who exhausts us will never admit they are asking too much. Instead, they constantly stress how much they've tried, how we fail to notice it, how they are actually the ones suffering most. And we, already tired, push ourselves further, to be more understanding, to not be too harsh, to preserve what's left. When someone drains us, yet makes us feel guilty for wanting to leave, they have succeeded in turning our exhaustion into obligation. They don't need to say it aloud. Their gestures, their silence, their eyes quietly implant the false belief: if we walk away, we are the problem. The truth is, no one is obligated to remain in a relationship that depletes their inner life. No one is responsible for sustaining a bond that makes them lose themselves day by day. And no one should feel guilty for choosing peace, even if it means letting go of someone once dear. A healthy relationship does not make us live in a constant state of apology for our basic needs. It doesn't make us feel like a burden. It doesn't demand that we change who we are, strain endlessly, perform constantly, just to be worthy of love. If someone makes us feel guilty just because we are tired, because we need to step back, because we start questioning the real value of the connection, then we must face the truth that we are trading away our inner vitality to maintain something no longer healthy. There is nothing wrong with staying because of love, but if that love is mixed with fear, guilt, and the belief that we must carry both people's burdens, then it is no longer love. It is a binding born of depletion, not of nourishment. We can read hundreds of pages on Stoicism, but its true value only begins when we apply it to daily life. In every conversation, every relationship, every moment we face others and ourselves. I've been in relationships that drained my energy, where every time I said no, I felt guilty, and every time I set a boundary, I was met with a wounded look. Back then, I thought I needed to endure better, but Stoicism taught me the opposite. Peace does not come from passive endurance. It comes from actively protecting one's dignity. To live stoically each day does not mean becoming cold or detached from emotion. It means being clear-eyed enough to discern love from manipulation, sacrifice from exploitation. We learn to trust our intuition without needing to justify it, to say enough without feeling ashamed, and more importantly, we stop trying to change others. We focus on mastering ourselves, because in the end, inner freedom is not just a philosophical idea, it's a way of life, repeated daily in every small decision. If you found this content valuable, don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications so you won't miss future posts. And no matter how noisy the world gets, always keep a quiet place within, one that no one may enter unless you allow it. See you in the next video.